Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host Keith Crockford and today I am back chatting with Jake Field. Hello Jake.
Hi, Keith.
How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm recording this with you live from the Serengeti in Tanzania. So life couldn't be too much better, really.
Yeah, I've been enjoying listening to some of the stories. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about it in the next couple of weeks, maybe on a live or something. But I've definitely been enjoying hearing what you guys have been up to, and the photos look incredible.
I
won't lie. I am a little jealous. I know that I've got some good trips to look forward to, but I am a little bit jealous.
Yeah, it's been a really good trip, and it's been great to come and see some animals and come to the Serengeti and see them. We went to see the migration today, but we're going to do a podcast on this safari when I get back and give me time to kind of digest it and think about it, and then we will properly do a podcast on that. But today we are going back to a couple of weeks ago, and this podcast we're going to basically call it the Altitude Center Part 2, because a couple of weeks ago, before I left to come across to Tanzania, both you and I went and visited the Altitude Center in London, didn't we?
Yeah, honestly, one of the most interesting, informative, and probably funniest afternoons of my life. It was a really, really good laugh, and I learned so much as well. Like I thought that, I kind of maybe naively went into it, thinking, yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. But you and I have been to Altitude so many times. I'm sure a lot of it will be what we tell our groups anyway. And he was just able to give us so much more information on, more of the data and to actually see the data on a screen in front of you. And that's, I suppose, one of the things I was quite nervous about, was because you and I have been to Altitude multiple times, but ultimately we're just taking each other's word for it that we're feeling okay. So to have the data up on the screen and you can't lie and say, oh yeah, I'm feeling fine, if you're clearly not, that was going to be an interesting one.
So going back on our podcast, a few months ago, probably now, I did an episode with Nick from the Altitude Center, which was a really interesting episode where we talked about what the Altitude Center can do. And having never been there, I kind of just, went along with it really. But we got invited to go along, both you and I, Jake, and basically go through the process of having the testing done as if you were a client. And that's basically what we went and did. And we've recorded a bit of a vlog that will release within the next couple of weeks as well, which kind of details it in a bit more detail. But I think the idea of the podcast today was just to talk about the process and actually what it was or what it is you do when you go there. So do you just want to talk about for a minute, actually, what is the process? What do you do when you get there?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did was, when we arrived, we were met by the amazing team at the Altitude Center, really welcoming. They showed us around. They gave us a little bit of an introduction into everything in the center, from a whole kind of pressurized room, if they kind of all set to 2,700 meters. So that whole room sits at 2,700 meters. They've also got a gym. They've got a couple of what I would say kind of passive training zones where you can hook yourself up to a mask and simulate being at different altitudes whilst you're sat there. And then they've got quite an active zone. So we began by going down to the active zone. We had a little introduction from Nick, where he kind of spoke to us about what we're going to be doing. Initially, it was just a consultation. So he was asking what our experience was. He took a little bit of information from us, sort of age, things like that, just to get a bit of an idea. We set up these profiles, and then those profiles were then linked onto a screen. So what we were then able to do is, as we were going through the testing, that was all being shown on a screen relevant to our profiles and coming up with our heart rates and our pulse ox stats and all that sort of stuff. And he kind of did a really good job at explaining what the body goes through when you're at altitude. So that's how it all started. Was we went through a bit of an initial consultation. Obviously, he asked us what our goals were. So if you were going there and you had a specific mountain that you were going to go climb or an altitude that you were going to go to, then he's really able to tailor your training plan around that. And then we jumped on the treadmill, really.
Yeah, I think in the first instance, it was really interesting, wasn't it? Because obviously there were the two of us there. We kind of had him for an hour and a half. We didn't go through the full consultation as a paying client would do. He was kind of showing us what the full consultation was, but actually for some of it, you did bits of it, I did bits of it, and from there. And the first thing we did was obviously once he checked our blood pressure, he had checked our lung capacity, he had done all that just to make sure that actually we could go through the process of going through the initial testing. And then we did the passive testing stuff, which was really interesting, which was just putting the mask on. And I mean, you went first and he took your...
Yeah.
Did you go to like 2,700, I think was the first one he took you to?
Yeah, so I had the mask. He put the mask on me first, and then I had a pulse oximeter on my finger. So he was measuring obviously the heart rate through that as well. And he took me straight up to about 2,700 meters, which you are starting to get into altitude. You can definitely feel that that there was slightly less oxygen. It was a bit strange breathing it through a mask. But what was really interesting from that was, I think instantly you could tell how nervous I was straight away, that there was a camera on me because we were filming it, and also a bunch of people, and you become very, very aware that your heart rate's on a screen. So I think that was quite entertaining.
Yeah, and I was watching to see how unfit you were as well, so that set you off straight away.
Yes, it was instantly that heart rate spiked, but I was sort of kind of worrying about that. Once I saw the heart rate going up, I then worried a little bit more of why is that and what's this? So it sort of ended up spiraling a little bit. But what he did was he started up a bit of a conversation with me. I ended up looking away from the screen, and that kind of relaxed me. And when I turned around again, the stats were looking much more normal. So it is funny how much your mind can really have an impact on those results.
And the interesting thing is with that test is it's about how quick your body recovers, isn't it? And they basically, once they see you plateau on the charts, they then ask you to remove the mask, and they basically want to see how quickly you return to 99% oxygen saturation, really, isn't it? And that's the bit they're looking for in there, because then straight away after you had done yours, obviously they saw that I was more the true mountaineer, and they decided to put me to 3.5.
Yeah, they stuck you to 3.5. Yeah, straight away.
And surprisingly, he was quite shocked with how quickly I recovered, and I was pretty shocked, to be honest, how quickly I recovered at that point. But for that test, it was looking at your recovery, when it was what they were interested in. And like you said, then within the same room, then they've got 3 or 4 treadmills in that room, all linked up to the machines. And they kind of test you on. So we were walking at 3 kilometers an hour at a 12% incline, which they're then trying to pretty much replicate what you would be doing if you were on a trekking trip, in essence. Like, if you were walking Everest Base Camp, or you were walking Kilimanjaro or Mount Toubkal, predominantly 12% incline, 3 kilometers an hour. And then they were just increasing the altitude that you were at whilst you were on there, weren't they?
Yeah, so that was really interesting, going from the passive testing to the active testing, and seeing what difference that made. Especially because the main 2 things that they're looking at, like you say, one is how quick your recovery is. So when they take the mask off, how quickly your oxygen levels go back, and I think it's fair to say we're all quite shocked at how good your recovery was. It was really, really quick. And that was something that I think he said genetically, I think for most people, you either have really good recovery in that sense, and you can, your body can recover that quickly, or it doesn't. And then the other thing, especially with the active, is they're then looking at where your heart rate and your oxygen levels sit when you're being active. And obviously that's something that you can improve over time by going through training and being at altitude and things like that. So yeah, when we were walking and they were setting us to a certain altitude, that's where it was really interesting, kind of measuring those numbers once you're actually being active, which is what you're going to be doing a good majority of the time on an Everest Base Camp trip or a Kilimanjaro trip. You know, it might be well and good that your stats are excellent when you're sat down, but unfortunately you do have to climb the thing. so yeah, it was important to test that.
Yeah, because they basically, you know, again, they started us off at 2,700 meters, 3,500 meters, and we actually went up to 5,100 meters was the highest that we went to. And that was pretty tough. Like
that one. Yeah.
Like I got quite lightheaded working out on that one. And it was interesting because they basically, they have a limit on your oxygen saturation of 75. And once you hit 75% oxygen within your bloodstream, that's, you know, the test over. And to be fair, we were pretty much bang on together when we both hit the 75.
I'd say so, yeah. Yeah, very even.
And like we hit that within 2.5 minutes of doing it. So we were at 99%.
Which is crazy how quick that went down, yeah.
Yeah, and we started walking at 99%, and within 2.5 minutes, our oxygen saturation had gone down to 75%. And we both kind of looked at each other and were like, blimey, they've stopped the test on us. Like that's
yeah.
If we got to give up our jobs. Like, and he was like, well, you know, we either stop it at 75% or 5 minutes. And of course, then you worry again, thinking, well, we're only halfway through that process. And we were like, well, how do we compare with other people who are doing this test? And he was like, some people we have to stop them after 15 seconds. Like, and we were like, oh, okay, then that's actually not too bad. Then if we've managed to make 2.5 minutes and not 15 seconds, that's not too bad. But you know, we properly got. I was properly lightheaded. Like it was
really funny because we'd gone through the rest of the test, and like you say at the beginning, we were sort of leapfrogging because we were doing a bit of a sped up consultation. And then we both obviously did get on the treadmills, and we started at sort of 3.5, and then it was around the 4.5, and then he said, "Oh, we're going to take you to 5.1 now." And I don't really know what I was expecting, but if I'm being completely honest, and I don't know whether this is just because you and I have been to altitude maybe more recently or just more often, you know, or we're just naturally gifted athletes is what I'm going with. But the other kind of heights that we were working at, 3.5, 4.5, I felt quite comfortable with. So I kind of went into it thinking, oh, this will be okay. And that mask went on, and very, very quickly, like you said, I started feeling quite lightheaded. The vision was definitely going a little bit blurry. I started to feel a little bit wobbly, but yeah, it was the vision starting to go in and out a little bit that kind of I really noticed first of all. And I looked over at you, and you kind of seemed okay. You just seemed quite focused. And then obviously being competitive.
Because I just wanted to beat you. That was the only reason why I was quite focused.
Well, this was the thing. So I wanted to beat you so desperately that I sort of had, then I got back into my focus, and I was like, well, he hasn't said stop yet. And he did say, oh, if you start feeling a little bit lightheaded. Now, anybody listening, this is obviously not the way that you're supposed to do it. Obviously, listen to your body, do what is sensible. You know, not being sensible. But I looked across and I went, oh, Keith looks like he's all right. I know he said stop after you go a little bit blurry vision, but you know, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And what was really funny was, after we both took the masks off and then turned around to each other and went, okay, yeah, you were feeling it as well. It wasn't just me. It was actually, it was really interesting. And I have never simulated it before. And I think I was really intrigued to see how similar it is to being at altitude. You know, I've never suffered touch wood so far with any severe altitude illnesses or even particularly bad acclimatization sickness, which we say that everybody goes through and everybody will experience. I've never really suffered with any bad acclimatization sickness. So it was really interesting to get a little bit of an insight into what it's like for people who do feel the effects stronger than others. And actually to realize that even though you've got a mask on and you're on a treadmill and you're, in this room, it is very, very similar to what it's like when you're standing on top of Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, because from there we then went up and went into the chamber, which is like their altitude training center in essence. Like, he was telling us some of the big names in the sporting world that go and use it, which we're not allowed to mention. But the room is kept at 2,700 meters. It's got spin bikes. It's got treadmills. One of the treadmills that they've got in there goes to, was it 22 or 25%?
Oh, I'll have to double check. I think it was about 22%, something crazy like that, which I didn't realize how steep that was until I went on it. I didn't actually realize how steep that was.
Yeah, because the room is constantly kept at 2,700 meters, and when you hear of altitude training, the British athletes, they used to go to Kenya or Ethiopia and go out there and do a training camp out there. Like nowadays, they're not bothering with that. Nick was telling us that they would just go there for an hour's run on the treadmill, and that would be their altitude training session because the room is permanently at 2,700 meters. And again, he had us walking it 20% at 3 kilometers an hour. Obviously, we had to push that a little bit, and we started ramping the speed up when each other were on it to simulate a proper good workout. But again, and it was interesting because after both you and I had gone on there, Tom, who was there from our marketing team, was there doing some camera work for us, and we put him on it as well. And Tom's never really been or spent too much time at altitude, so it was interesting to see his concept and how he reacted to it as well.
Yeah, that was quite good fun. So Nick put you on this one-off treadmill that goes to some crazy incline, like you say, about 20%. And so we set the speed, and I think as you're going, I'm there in the corner, sort of popping up the speed and seeing how quick we can get it, and then vice versa. And Tom was watching, and I thought, you know what, this is too good of an opportunity to miss. Like, actually, let's get Tom on it, and he can have a go. And he definitely, I think for him, it was his first experience of being at altitude and then being sort of active at altitude. And he said that it was a really, really apparent difference from if he's running on a treadmill normally, just being in that room. He was like, I can feel that, I'm sweating a lot quicker. I'm getting a lot more tired quicker. In his defense, I think that might have been in some part the fact that he wasn't expecting to be exercising, and he was wearing big DM boots and jeans, and obviously we were in gym kit, so it's probably a little bit harsh to get him doing it. But getting his take on it, and I think he definitely struggled a little bit more than you and I, but that was the first time, and that's something that he would then work towards.
And then from there, we went on and did a pod session up in the pods. And do you just want to explain to people before we get into that, Nick was telling us about his 13, he had worked with a climber this year that had done a 13-day ascent of Mount Everest. Now, considering most people would need a 3-month, they would be out in Nepal for somewhere between 2.5 to 3 months to summit Everest. This person, excuse me, had worked with Nick. They had pre-acclimatized to 6,500 meters. They'd gone to Nepal. They basically climbed through the Khumbu Icefall once because that is still below 6,500 meters. And then they climbed, and obviously they were on oxygen anyway, but And then so from the point of landing to the point of departing Nepal, they had done Everest in 13 days.
Which is sort of the length of time that it takes you really on an Everest base camp trek. So just a bit over. I mean, that's crazy. But one of the things that he was saying to us is that, and I don't know. I mean, it's an amazing achievement. I don't know how I feel about people doing more and more speed ascents and things like that. I love immersing myself in the country and spending a bit more time there. But obviously, they are becoming more popular as people are getting busier with less time and setting records. And really, he was saying that what a lot of people are doing now is that they will do their final session at the Altitude Centre, which is in London, and they'll go straight to the airport. And it was a question that you and I had at the beginning for him, was how long do you stay acclimatized, or how quickly does that tolerance to altitude, should we say, stays and remains? That was what was really interesting to me.
Yeah, because he was saying, like, between sort of 10 days, 2 weeks in reality is that you could have your last session like 10 days before you went out, in essence, and still be acclimatized to that point. And I think,
and you would acclimatize much quicker when you're there as well. Your body would be much more susceptible, or maybe not susceptible is the right word, but a lot more
receptive.
Kind of receptive. There you go, to being at altitude.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing for me with all of this, and we had this big discussion about it, is people that go out and lead trips, and I think people who are doing these trips, if you can be acclimatized before you go out there to some degree, there is a chance that you will enjoy the trip a whole lot more. And we were saying, from a leader's perspective, like, if we acclimatized to 6,000 meters and then went to do a Kili trip at 5,895, like, knowing full well that if we were on the summit and you had a problem as a leader, like, you wouldn't be suffering because you were already acclimatized. It would feel to you like you weren't at 5,008 and you could deal with any problem. And I just think, if people are spending all this money on these trips, to be as fully prepared, we've said it for years, like, obviously we can't promote Diamox. We can't say people take Diamox. I did a podcast the other day with Hannah, who specializes in altitude. We had this whole discussion on Diamox, and we can't say that, but one thing we do say is if you can take this pill that might give you a chance of fulfilling your dream, then why not investigate whether or not to take that pill or not? And I think the altitude, the Altitude Centre thing as well, I'm kind of in exactly the same position. Like, if you're going to go and do Mount Toubkal, or you're going to go and do Kilimanjaro or Everest Base Camp, and you could go and do 5-6 sessions and pre-acclimatize yourself to 5,500 meters, like, are you going to enjoy your trip anymore? Well, I think you probably are, because for a lot of people, it's their first time at altitude. They don't know what being at altitude's like, and they are worried that every little symptom, sign that they're having is a cause of altitude, when not every time that's the case, but constantly in their head, they're worried about altitude. Whereas if you went to the Altitude Centre and had a consultation and were told, your body and your genetics works very well at altitude, then surely that's going to take some of that worry away from them, so they can go and enjoy their trip more.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any downsides really to going to the Altitude Centre, because, like I say, even if training session, we always say to people it's a great idea to start training and keeping fit for these trips. You don't need to be incredibly fit for the majority of our trips. However, the fitter you are, the more enjoyable it's going to be, because the easier it will be. And
that's one thing that Nick was saying, wasn't it? He said, if you're going to turn up to the Altitude Centre, bring your boots and bring your rucksack and have some weight in it. And, I want to see you walking on the treadmill in your boots and your backpack on.
train in the kit that you're going to be using. There's no point training all the time in a, well, although we're talking about a gym, but there's no point training all the time in shiny trainers and gym shorts if you're going to be out in big hiking boots and wearing a rucksack. You need to be training in the same way to reflect for some of it anyway. There are going to be strength training exercises and cardio and things that you'll do. But like I say, I really do think you need to get used to doing what you're going to be going out and doing.
I mean, for me, I think the pod sessions are the best type of training I could ever do. I mean, that was like
after killing each other on the treadmill with the crazy incline and definitely winding each other up, being invited to go and do the pod session afterwards, I think was you and I were sold. It was brilliant.
I mean, if we just talk about the pod session here, so the pod session basically is you sit in a reclining chair and you put a mask on, and they basically do a HIIT session at altitude, but the HIIT session is using altitude rather than using physical exertion. So you will put the mask on and you will be at 0. So you'll be at sea level and you'll have 5 minutes at sea level and you'll watch your stats. And they've got 2 chairs there, haven't they, with big screens in front of you. And they're showing again your heart rate and your O2. And then obviously Nick was then happy that he was going to put us at 5,900 at that point. And he would then, so you had 5 minutes at being at sea level, 5 minutes at 5,900 meters. And as soon as you finish those 5 minutes at 5.9, they drop you back down to 0 again. And you basically will spend an hour doing 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, just training your body to be at altitude. And watching the chart was just so interesting. Like, it's literally there in front of you on a big 42-inch TV, and you can just watch your pulse ox dropping as your heart rate rises. And then you get, then the 5 minutes is up, and it literally just comes the opposite way again. And you just watch this perfect graph, and you just sit there, reading a book or listening to some music, and that is how you can train for altitude now.
It's brilliant. I mean, the fact that he then actually said to us, okay, recline, these chairs recline all the way back. That's it. Relax, pop your head back, take it nice and easy. I mean, I could have fallen asleep at one point. It just felt so bizarre to anything that I've ever done before when it comes to training for a trip, to be able to sit there. And as we said, if you have got a busy working life, and you are worried about this taking up time, there's 2 brilliant things about these pod sessions. One is if you live in an area where it's easy for you to commute to London, then it's a couple of minute walk from Liverpool Street. So super convenient. And that's how we got up there. So a couple of minutes from Liverpool Street, and you can go in and you can bring your laptop, you can reply to emails on your phone, or let's say listen to a podcast, listen to music, whatever it might be. And then the other one that I found was really interesting, and this might be, potentially able to work for some people, is I didn't realize you could rent them. So a smaller version, not quite with the big screens or all that sort of stuff, but a smaller portable version.
It's exactly the same machine. You just don't get the big. You don't get
it's the same. Oh, okay. So that's what I was thinking. Okay, so it's exactly the same machine. Exactly the same machine then that you can rent and you can have in your house. And you can get set up and you can sit there watching TV and you can be training at the same time. So, he was talking us through that as well. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and you can rent it for a month, and I think it's not cheap. It's nearly £500 to rent the machine for a month. Obviously, you need to weigh that up with the cost of your trip. Like, if you think, well, I'm spending 3,000, 5,000 wherever you're going on your next trip, then you might go, well, actually, for £500, I'll pay that. But I think also, if you're doing the trip with a friend of yours to rent the machine and then, and have it between you for that month is that's makes it even cheaper then. Or if there's 3 or 4 of you, well, all of a sudden you're paying 125 quid a month to do this, and you can all go round and do it at someone's house or share the machine or however you want to do it. But yeah, definitely, I think there is a lot there, and I'm really interested to go through the process before a trip in the future where I'm going to altitude, and then I'll come back and report. And I know you're thinking the same, Jake, that actually, you're just going to train it into Liverpool Street. And the thing is, like, once you do the consultation, absolutely. I think, and what you need to remember about the altitude center is everything is data led. Like, they've got the data. They've done this with lots and lots of people. They can look at your data and they can, decipher how you're going to react at altitude, what you're going to need, like how many sessions you're going to need, for the altitude that you're going to. So they will almost devise a training plan for you within your consultation that says, you're going to need to have 6 pod sessions, 8 pod sessions, 15 pod sessions, depending on where you're at. Or it might be that actually, do you know what, you need to go in, get inside the chamber a bit and do some, high intensity training at 2,700 meters, and then do 5 pod sessions after that. Like, they're going to give you that information off the data that they're receiving. And I think that's the really important thing. I think that's the nice thing about, by us going in there, we've opened up some links with the guys there now. And, there's some cool things to come with what we're going to be able to offer our clients at the altitude center within the coming months for anyone that's going to be doing a trip. Do you just want to talk through we're not going into details and dates and what we're going to be doing, but just sort of let people know what the plan is for the future?
Absolutely. So if you're listening to this and it does sound like something that you would be interested in, then we are teaming up with the Altitude Centre in a few different ways to be able to give everybody that experience. So one of them is we're going to be looking at potentially getting some group dates together where we'll, as a group, we'll all head down to the Altitude Centre on a certain day and we'll go and do a discounted consultation. The other one that we're looking at doing is they have a number of different training plans that are available for you and for the trip that you're going to be doing. So they've agreed to help us out and provide some training plans for those individuals that are interested in going on our trips and going to altitude.
Whether you're on a Kilimanjaro trip or an Everest Base Camp trip, they've got a training plan for specific trips.
They have scaled it all the way from like you say, a Mount Toubkal trip all the way up to your Island Peaks, your Mirror Peaks, things like that, and they are tailored training plans. So that's going to be really interesting. And then the other one is just access to the Altitude Centre itself, and doing the consultations that we went and did. And obviously should be up soon on our YouTube channel.
And is there also another one where we're going to be doing some Zoom calls, like some group Zoom calls where we can do some Q&A stuff with the guys there? So
yes, absolutely. So we're looking at doing sort of a bit of an online consultation as well. So basically that'll be a chance to jump on a Zoom call with Nick from the Altitude Centre, ask him all the questions that you've got about being at altitude, whether it's your first time and you're all feeling really nervous, or whether maybe you're looking at pushing those altitudes, whether you've been to like Mount Toubkal and now you're looking at doing your Achilles and your Island Peaks and things like that. So that'll be a chance to jump on and then also jump on with one of us as guides, so that you can get 1, loads of information about going to altitude, and 2, loads of information about the specific trip that you're on or that you're looking at going on as well.
Brilliant. Well, Jake, thanks ever so much for popping on to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Obviously, we'll finish the podcast off by saying that my stats were so much better than yours at altitude.
Well, you're just going to have to watch the video.
Really quiet now. You can't hear what you're saying. Like, your microphone seems to have been turned off. We will be putting stuff out to everyone, explaining what's going to happen with the Bucket List Company and the Altitude Centre and how you guys can benefit from that. If you're not on one of our trips, there will be a link in the show notes to the Altitude Centre where, if this is of super interest to you, I mean, a consultation, the basic consultation starts at around about £199, I think, for the the one-to-one consultation in there. So if you are heading out and you're not one of our clients, then, that is still available to you guys to go and do. Obviously, please mention that you heard about the Altitude Centre on the Bucket Lister podcast, because we didn't realize this, but plenty of people have said that to Nick when they've turned up, that they learned about it from our first podcast that we did, which is super to hear that people are actually listening to what we're saying, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, it is well worth it. It's something that we are looking to do more of. I mean, if you've got any questions, you can come back to Jake or I, and we are more than happy to help you. Or likewise, you can contact the guys at the Altitude Centre, and they'll be more than happy to help you as well. So, Jake, that brings an end. We've managed 35 minutes there. We're going for a 30-minute podcast. We've done nearly 36. So I think we're almost there. So thanks ever so much, everyone, for listening. For me, all the way from the Serengeti in Tanzania. I'll be back in a few days' time, back in the UK. But I'm only back for 10 days because then I'm heading back out to Tanzania again. I mean, this has been a lovely trip because I haven't been at altitude. But when I come back, I'll be doing Kilimanjaro for the 15th time. So I will be going back to altitude again. So this has been a lovely little... I mean, I think I got to 2,200 meters. So I've been at altitude. Like, I've done some altitude, but
yeah, okay, yeah. Was that? Did you get on top of an elephant and jump?
No, just sat in the truck driving around taking photos. And obviously, if you are interested, from what I've said about safaris, then Jake will be quizzing me up in a few weeks' time about the trip that I've just done. But I kind of want to finish it first before I start answering.
Make sure you don't get eaten by a lion
or a baboon. But I'll tell them
about that. Yeah,
on the podcast next time. So if you're interested in the baboon story, then tune in a couple of weeks' time, and I will tell the baboon story. So anyway, thanks ever so much, everyone, for listening. It's great to have you join us on the Bucket Lister podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the show, then please do so. And also, if you would just please, before you get rid of this, is just go and give us a 5-star review, because that really does help us with the podcast charts and everything, and tells Apple to push us out in more directions. So if you could go in, like and subscribe to us, and give us a nice 5-star review, and even just make a little comment like, the podcast is great, or Jake doesn't know what he's talking about, or anything you like.
Or
just put it on
how long is Keith's outro?
Yeah. I haven't even done the outro yet. I'm coming up to the outro. Anyway, I'm off because it is now late in the evening, and I am going to go to bed because it is so late, because I'm 2 hours ahead of you, and this is how committed I am to this podcast. So thanks ever so much, everyone, and we will catch you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.